Welcome everybody. In this video, we're going to talk about how you can use Clojure as a way to store, let me just get rid of this first, that's going to distract me, hide that. How you can use Clojure to store parameter values in your callbacks. So this is where we're starting out. This is not where we're going to end up. What we have is a very simple, very contrived database that I've made up, and each JSON file is based on a particular user. So we have our list of users here, and each one has a username and a password. And if you go into, for example, butterfly_sprinkle.json, that will be the information for that user. And each user has a secret. So this particular user's secret, butterfly_sprinkle, her secret is that she ate the rest of the ice cream. Or he, butterfly_sprinkle, let's not, it is 2017 after all, I would not want to offend. But I imagine this being a female when I created the name. Likewise, we've got dogfight dino tractor, I imagine this being a 9-year-old boy, and his secret is he punched his little brother when mom wasn't looking. So we've got these different secrets and we want to collect them. So I've written a function called getSecret, and we pass in our list of users, and we take the list of users and we iterate over it with for each. It'll return an object, which is the user, and each object has a username and a password. And so we're going to use the trusty fs.read file from Node that I've been using in a bunch of videos lately. We're going to look into the simple database, and we're going to look in that particular user's JSON file. We're going to read out the object, pass the response into our callback, and if you've watched the other videos or are familiar with read file, you know that it passes in an error if there's an error, or it passes in null if there was no error for error, and gives you a response if there was a response. So we do a very basic, quick error handling there. The data comes back as a JSON string, so we need to parse it in order to get the secret out of it. And then we print the results, which is our next callback up here. And as per usual, I'm just console logging things out because it makes things very easy to follow. So if I run node app up here, then what we get is a list of secrets. And that's great, it worked, but there's a bit of a problem here. I don't actually know which secret pertains to which user. And that's because our callback function doesn't know which response it is handling for which user. So for example, if I'm getting a response, the response object, the response object is just an object with one property, secret, and the secret. Yoga Mom doesn't really do yoga. That's that's a good secret. So the problem here is that if we wanted to print out, for example, the username, so if we wanted to console log username and secret, we don't know which user we are currently running through. This user would be, or the username would not be a known variable in scope here. So we need a way to pass the username into our callback function. Now, of course, if we just execute our callback function down here and pass in object.username, like so, then we're executing our function. And so there won't be a function to callback. So if we execute that, should be throwing me an error that so everything basically breaks. Because that's no longer returning a function, there is actually no return value. If I did this, it would return this value, and then it would return the console log where I'd put returns there. So if we want to pass something into our callback, we have to give the read file a new function that it can run as the callback. So here's how you do it. What we will do is we'll bump this guy down like so, and now we're going to return that function so that now when we execute callback and pass in username, And I'll do it like this, because I find this the easiest way to not mess up all my code, is if I just copy and paste it into there. Do some of this, make it, the indentation is a little off, but you can still understand what's going on. We now have a function that returns a function, which is our actual callback. So we're executing callback and passing in username. Now, because of the way that closure works, when we execute this function inside of the callback, the function that we've called callback, it will still remember the username that it was connected to. So if we were to pass in, let's go pass in username, and we'll pass in secret. Oops. Username. That's why I write things out ahead of time now, because I used to try to do it while I was typing, and I could not. I was absolutely terrible. Oh, excuse me. See, I can't even think what I'm doing here. Try some of that. Apparently, I couldn't think about doing it as a template string, so we'll just do it that way. Now, unless I've broken something, we should now be passing our username property from the user object up here into our callback function. That's going to make a unique, uniquely scoped callback function for that particular user. So it's going to have the username variable stored with a username, with the value from that particular user, so that when we execute the function that was returned, it'll know which user we were referring to, and they should match up. So let's see if that works. And there we go. So we have butterfly underscore sprinkle, I ate all the ice cream, yoga mom, I don't actually do yoga, et cetera, et cetera. And now they're paired up. Now, the reason why you might actually see something like this, I mean, this is a very silly example. I've written a more realistic example in run.js. So now that you've seen how it can work, you can pass variables from, or you can pass values in and store them in your callback so that you can execute a unique callback without having to do some weird state tracking outside of the function. Now that you've seen how that works, let's check out a slightly more realistic example. So keep in mind, in the database._simple, every JSON object had one property. It was called secret. Well, in database, I have some very janky authentication where instead of having the same property, each one has to access the secret, you have to request it based on its password. So the username is the file name, and then the password is the property name for the secret. Now, obviously, this is not super secure. In the real world, you would never do something like this, but it gives us a good way of understanding how you can use something like an authentication token or something and pass it in to your callback function. So what we're doing in run.js is something very similar. You'll see I have my callback function, and we're passing in password instead of username. And this part is exactly the same as it was before, except for this line here. So instead of having the string secret like we did in app.js, like that, it's not secret, it's a dynamic value. It changes based on which user we were looking at. So we pass in the value from password, which we pass in from into our callback function when we initially make the request, and we know that it's paired with the proper username because it was stored in the callback with that particular username in the same request. So those will automatically be matched up, and it'll give us the secret value without us having to hard code anything in or make one unique callback for every single user. So let's run that up here. Go node run. And there's all our secrets pertaining to each user. And once again, if we wanted to pass along, we wouldn't probably pass along password, but maybe we would pass along the username. And we can pass in username and password. And so this is going to execute, store those in the outer function so that the function that's returned remembers these values, and then we can pass them along into our callback for the next function. And then that callback function can handle that data. And so now I'm going to do it with template strings this time. I think that's much easier. And now that we have our values passed along, we can handle them however we need, and we know that they're going to be paired up properly. So let's just go username, proper spaces in there this time. And there you go. We have everything paired up. And so we're able to do quite a lot with a small amount of code because we made this callback totally reusable. I hope that makes some sense to you guys. I think this is one of the you can do, and it comes up quite a bit if you're working with things like network requests or something like that. If you are new to Clojure, this probably makes absolutely no sense. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head if I've made a video on Clojure. If I haven't, I'll probably make another one just because I'm not super pumped about the more recent, or the early videos that I made. They were pretty sloppy. So these ones are still not where I probably will end up, but we're making some progress. So keep tabs on what's coming out in the future, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks. Bye.